Welcome to Your Cyber Path, the podcast that helps you get your dream cybersecurity job by sharing the secrets of experienced hiring managers and top cybersecurity professionals with you. Now, on to the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Your Cyber Path. My name is Kip Boyle. Great to be here with you today. And Jason Dion is here also. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Kip. Great to be back.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We are in the middle of a 5-episode series. We're covering the CIA NA sequence, which used to be called the CIA Triad all by itself, but now we've added a couple of items to the end of that triad. We're going to talk about the first one in our episode today. So today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the N in the CIA NA, and that's non-repudiation, which I don't know if the folks listening to this episode have ever heard that term, non-repudiation. It's really kind of like a techno-weenie sort of a term. It's a very nerdy term. But let's talk about okay, if it's such a weird term, why are we talking about it? Like, what is this, Jason?
Yeah, so when I hear the word non-repudiation, it just reminds me of one of those like $5 words that means something really simple, but people think of like just using a complicated word like quintessential, right? Like I hear that word and like, what does that mean? And then you go, oh, it just means that's the perfect example of something, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely ubiquitous.
Right? So when you think about words like that, sometimes it's just a really complicated word to mean something simple. And when I think of non-repudiation, it basically means can't say didn't do the thing that you did. So let's say, I went over to Kim's house tonight and I was really mad at him. So I decided to, put a flaming bag of dog poo on his door and ring the doorbell and run away. He would never know it was me, right? But if I signed my name to that bag before I lit it on fire, then he would know Jason did it. I could say, I had my thing to do, right?
If my Ring doorbell caught you.
Yes, right. That's a detective control, though, in that case, right?
That's right. That's right.
But that's what we're talking about, right? When you talk about non-repudiation, it's when you take an action on a computer system, you can't say you didn't do it. And so this all goes into your auditing process and capturing who does what when in the system, journaling those things so we can go back and investigate them later if there's an issue.
Yeah.
The only way that we do non-repudiation is really with digital signatures in most computer networks. And so we're going to dive into digital signatures and non-repudiation as we talk about this.
Yeah.
What do you think about when thinking about non-repudiation?
Well, some common everyday examples I think would be very, very helpful, other than the flaming bag of poo.
I'm sorry.
I can tell. So let's see if we can, rein it in here a little bit. So when you get a delivery and it's a high value item, let's say your next iPhone or, you got yourself a nice laptop or something like that. Well, when FedEx or UPS brings it to your door, they're not going to just leave it at the stoop and walk away. They want a signature. And the reason they want that signature is because they want proof of delivery. They don't want anybody coming back to them and saying, you didn't deliver my thing, pay me for my lost, electronic item. So that's actually a form of non-repudiation. It's an analog form, but we've been doing that for years and years and years. The delivery company just wants to be able to say, you can't deny that we gave you this package over your door threshold. So that's a real life example where somebody else wants you to sign something because, they don't want you to get out of it. But Jason, can you think of a time when I would want non-repudiation for my benefit?
Yeah. So, one of the reasons I like to use non-repudiation is whenever I'm downloading a new application, right? So if I'm downloading a new app in the iPhone store, or in the App Store or Google Play Store, or even from Microsoft Store for Windows computers, when you download that code, the first thing your system does is it checks that application package and verifies that it was digitally signed. And the reason they do that is because if anybody added any more ones and zeros, like some malware into that code, it's going to drastically change the hash value, which is made up by that digital signature. And so it'd be very quick and easy to see, hey, somebody messed with this, and this isn't the Angry Birds app you thought it was. This is actually Angry Birds that's going to hack your iPhone. And so you don't want to install that version, right?
Right. Angry Birds with bonus Trojan.
Yeah, with bonus Trojan. Exactly, right? And so that's what we use code signing for. And code signing is literally just a hash of the software code itself when it's been compiled. And then they take that hash and they crypt that hash with a private key, which then becomes this digital signature that gets appended to that package. It doesn't give us any confidentiality, but it does give us that integrity And then we get this non-repudiation because the developer can't say, I didn't do that code. I didn't put that Trojan in there. Well, it was signed with your key, buddy. So I guess you did. Right. And
Yeah.
let's figure that out.
Yeah. So as the person who downloads the app, I want the protection of knowing that what I downloaded is exactly what I was trying to download, and I didn't get anything more than what I expected. That's a great example, and I think that you've done a wonderful job of kind of like moving us into the digital realm, right, from the physical analog realm. So let's keep going with.
Before though, I do want to mention one thing on code signing, right?
Sure.
Common thing I see a lot of my Security Plus and CISO Plus students that they get confused. Just because it's digitally signed does not mean it is a good program or that it's not malicious. It just means it was digitally signed. And when it's digitally signed, it means the person who made it signed it and said, this is complete. This is how it is. But if I make an Angry Birds with a Trojan and I sign it, with a digital signature, it can still be code signed, but it would be my signature, not Angry Birds signature. And so you should be able to put that and see that, but just keep that in mind as well. Just because it's signed by the developer doesn't mean it's good. It just means it was delivered the way the developer intended. If that was a good thing, great. If it wasn't,
Right. Well, because we've had some supply chain attacks recently, some very high profile ones where code was snuck in prior to it being digitally signed. And so the publisher accidentally signed something that had malicious intent in it. And so that's something that can happen. And we're trying to figure out how to deal with that now as an industry. And that's just why we have full employment for the rest of our lives, because the bad people out there are constantly finding ways to circumvent the things we've put in place. Like we thought digital signatures was going to take care of this, and they innovated and they went to another place we didn't expect, and they found a way to work around it. Sometimes they just steal the signing keys outright. So that's another exploit that can sometimes happen.
Cybersecurity and whack-a-mole, right? As soon as we
exactly.
They did all the work around against it, we come up with something new.
That's right. Let's talk about some keywords, right? So when I think of non-repudiation, you've already said some things I thought were closely related, like a digital signature, code signing, hash value. What are some other keywords, Jason?
Yeah, I like to think about things like proofing or identity, because you're proving your identity and saying, I did this thing, and the proof is there that I did it. I think about PKI because, again, we're using public and private keys to do this code signing and to use non-repudiation. That's the most common digital form of non-repudiation is digital signatures. And then, again, like we said, digital signatures using that private key is really kind of the bread and butter when it comes to these, but it can be done in one world, like you said, where, I went to the Rockstar Picture Show on Saturday night with my family, and I brought back
to the time warp again.
We went through the time warp again, right? And, my wife, Tamara, and my kid, Alex, they were both, Rockstar virgins. And so when you came in, they said, oh, hey, are you fit before? You were? Okay. They put a V on your forehead. So they know that's that person, right? I went in, it was being shown at this, bar club place. They checked everybody's ID and said, are you old enough to come in? Are you the person who bought that ticket? And so I had to say, I'm Jason. I bought the ticket. I'm over 18. Okay, you can come in. And so that's another way to do identity proofing in a dialogue sense, by showing your driver's license saying, I am Jason and I bought the ticket and they match, so you can let me in.
Right. Because the assumption is, just like with the digital signing of the software code, that a driver's license or a state ID is is reliable, that it's not going to be something that somebody makes in their basement. And so that's why everybody trusts it. And so that's a good analog for what we would maybe talk about as an X509 certificate, right? Is that, here's this document, this digital document that has an identity in it, that somebody verified it. It's now signed. And so you can think of that as like a digital driver's license for a server or a person or a machine or a device. Anyway, now I'm really starting to unpack this topic. I'm going to pull myself back for a second. But before we go on, I want to make sure people know you said PKI, and that stands for Public Key Infrastructure. And so I just wanted to make sure that we did an acronym, blow up there. So we've talked about what non-repudiation actually is, right? Now, since we're talking about getting a job and going through an interviewing process, what kind of questions do you think the candidate might expect to hear with respect to non-repudiation, Jason? Give us an idea.
Yeah, I mean, the first one is going to be just really easy softball, right? Hey, Kip, what does non-repudiation mean to you? right? Something like that.
Right. It means that I get my iPhone from my UPS guy. Yeah.
Explain a little,
It'd be
a
like,
little more. Why is
what?
it on the table for me as a candidate? What would your answer be if I asked you what is
Yeah.
non-repudiation?
Yeah. I wouldn't just drop the UPS bomb and smile at the guy. That's not the way to do it. But what I would say is it's a way of proving that something is what it is and nothing more and nothing less. And it could be based on a digital signature so that I know if something has been changed from the time it was signed to the time that I receive it.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Short, sweet, to the point. The only thing I might add, I tend to like to give analogies when I give answers like that. So I would probably use the UPS guy as my analogy. Like,
Okay.
in the real world, if I mail a letter using certified mail to ensure that the person received it, they have to sign, and I get a return receipt that they
Yeah.
know, yes, they received that. And therefore, they can't say they never received the package, right?
Boy, I really want to affirm that. I think as a hiring manager, it's very valuable when somebody can give me an analogy, particularly when it's in a different context, that really makes the case that you understand what the heck you're talking about. So if you can do that, don't use the word to define itself. Give us an example. I think that's fantastic. Um, Another question you might expect to get, which is going to be a little bit more advanced and may or may not show up depending on the job that you're applying for, right? So, but it could be something like, how can a software company provide non-repudiation for their code when they're distributing it? Now, we've already talked about this, that they're using digital encryption in order to sign the code. But Jason, you're all over this, so tell us again how you would answer this question.
Okay, so if I'm putting on my Jason, the interviewee hat, I would say, well, a lot of software companies use code signing as a way to provide non-repudiation for their code. When they're done creating their code and it's gone through the software validation process and software testing process in the software development lifecycle, we get to the point where we're ready to distribute it. And as we get ready to distribute it, we're going to create a hash value of that code as it currently exists. We'll compile the software, create the hash value of that, and then we will digitally take that hash value and encrypt it using the company's private key that is the known good private key for this corporation. And because only our corporation has that private key, only we can sign that code. And that means the code is the same way it was when we distributed it as the time it is received by the end user. And that's how we end up using code signing as a method of doing digital signatures with non-repudiation to achieve that goal.
That's great, Jason. Thank you. Now I have a follow-up question. So if I receive this signed code, well, I don't have the private key of the organization that distributed it. So how do I know that what do I do? What do I need in order to be able to test this code to find out if the signature is valid?
Yeah, so to be able to test the code and verify that it's valid, you're going to use the public key for that organization. And because it's public, it exists out on the internet. So whichever organization created that public private key pair, for example, VeriSign is one of the most common ones. I would go into VeriSign server and say, hey, I need the public key for kipssoftwarecompany.com, and they'll give that to me. Once I have that, I can then do a hash value of the binary that I downloaded, and I will then unencrypt the digital signature, which I have from the code signing, and I'll compare those two. If the two values match, that means nothing's changed in the code, and that this code, it has good integrity, and we know that it came from kipssoftwarecompany.com, and therefore it's valid.
Perfect. Right. And scene, what I was trying to do there, right, is kind of get to the idea that in order for this to work, you have a private key that nobody except the author of the software has access to. But then you have a public key that everybody in the world needs to have access to in order for them to actually check that the digital signature is valid. Okay. So that's a little like practical application of public private key encryption. So this stuff really does happen in the real world. And oftentimes, these code signing public keys are actually going to be pre-distributed to you in the operating system that you install. So, like Windows, for example, already has the public keys for Microsoft software embedded inside of it so that you don't actually have to physically go out and retrieve it. But if you did buy Kips software, I probably don't have the clout to get Microsoft to put my public key in as a pre-installed certificate. So yeah, so in that case, you might have to go and fetch my public key.
But the nice thing is most of the operating systems and the app stores already have that happening in the background. So you wouldn't necessarily have to go to Kip's website to download his public key. because it's already in. If I got your software through Google Play, Apple App Store, the iTunes App Store, or Microsoft Store, all of those already use digital signatures, and we call those our developer keys. Once you create a developer account, you get the key, and you can then use that to do all your digital signature.
Right.
If you're going to use something like, Pretty Good Privacy or GPG instead, then you're going to have to actually physically download my public key because there's no centralized server. That's a decentralized method of public key.
Yeah. And you might run into that if you're going to download a piece of code off of like GitHub or something like that, right? Where you're going to download a precompiled binary, but you're going to check it to make sure that nobody has actually spiked it with a Trojan or some other piece of malicious code. And that's a very manually intensive process typically. So, okay, now we talked about hashing as a function, but in order to either calculate a hash, well, I guess if you're gonna verify a hash, you're gonna just generate a new hash and compare them. But how does that actually work, Jason? How do you actually do that? How do you actually calculate the hash value?
Yeah, so a hash value is simply an encryption algorithm, but what makes it special is that it takes a variable length input and it creates a fixed length output. So even if I take, a really long book like the dictionary or the Bible or the Encyclopedia Britannica, and I put it through this hashing algorithm, I'm still going to get the exact same size value on the outside. So if I'm using something like MD5, I'm going to get 128-bit hash. If I'm using SHA-1, I'm going to get 160-bit hash. SHA-2, I'm going to get a 256-bit hash as my result. And even if I have one character or a million characters, it's going to create the same length on the outside. So I can take whatever thing I want and put it through this hash and always get a unique individual fingerprint that I can use to identify that file. And I know on a previous episode, going back a couple of weeks, we talked about integrity. We delved really deep into integrity and hashing back then as well. So that's another one. If you ever listen to that episode, I recommend going back and listening to it. But that's the basics of how a hash works.
So why is there multiple hashing algorithms?
Yeah,
you just named off 3 of them. Why do we need 3?
Yeah, there's more than 3, but those are the 3 most common ones, right? And really what it comes down to is the longer your key, the fixed length output, which is not the key, sorry, the fixed length output, the hash value, the hash digest, the longer that is, the stronger that algorithm is considered. So if I have something like MD5 and I have 128 bits as my output, there's an infinite number of inputs because I can have every movie, every file, every letter, every 1 and 0 in the world will create a unique hash value. But there's only 2 to the 128 individual values that we have. And because of that, we have what's known as collisions. That's where you take the same thing, take 2 different things and get the same result. So for instance, if I walked into a classroom, I used to be a college professor. If I walked into a classroom with 30 people, the chances are if I asked if people had the same birth month, lots of people had the same birth month. If I asked, hey, who else was born on the same day as John or Mary? Generally, there's going to be at least 2 people in the class that share a birthday if you have 22 or more people. Not the same year, but the same month and day. And we call that the birthday paradox or the birthday collision. And this is how you can see how, because there are only 365 days possible for people to have birthdays. And if I put 22 people or more in a room, the chances are 2 of them are going to match up. There's a greater than 50% chance that 2 of them will match up. And so that's why we have this thing called a collision. What's happening is because we can create these collisions at hash values by having 2 different inputs creating the same output, I might have a no good file that is digitally signed with an MD5 hash that says, this is Kips good program file digitally signed. I say, wonderful. Let me go and create another file that will have the same exact hash digest, but it includes Kips code and some Trojans and some other white space until I can get it so I get the exact same hash value. And if I do that, I can then put my malicious code out there and people will download it thinking it's Kips good software, but it's actually a hacked version that I create.
But even though it'll generate the same hash.
Exactly, right? And so this becomes what we know as a collision. And because we kept having these collisions with MD5, we moved to something stronger, which was SHA-1. So from 128 bits to 160 bits, which means we have a lot more unique values. But again, that wasn't enough. So we went to 256 and then 384 and then 512. We keep adding more. And the longer the hash digest on the outside is, the less likely it is to have collisions from what you generate. And so that's why, we have these weaker hashing algorithms like MD5 that we don't want to use anymore because they are weak and they are vulnerable to this collision or we call this the birthday attack.
Right.
Birthday attack happening against.
I think you explained it very, very well. And if anybody gets this question on your interview, just listen to listen to what Jason said again, because he did a great job answering the question and then the follow-up question that I gave him. Now I want to do a check on a couple of acronyms that we use. So MD5 stands for with message digest, right? Number 5,
Digest version 5,
version 5.
which is a 128-bit hash algorithm. Yes.
So we used to have like MD1, MD2, MD3, and all that stuff is rubbish. Don't ever use any MDX.
Yep.
Don't do it, because it's just, as you've learned, it's gameable, right? So you don't want to do that. Now, this SHA-1 that Jason said, that's SHA, right? So that's an acronym, and it means Secure Hash Algorithm version 1. So we've got SHA-1, SHA-2, and presumably, SHA-3. Like, there's going to be a whole series of them. And as computing power gets better and greater, we're probably going to have to just continue to produce new versions of the secure hash algorithm to be able to resist attacks in the future that are not feasible today. So that's just another, kind of characteristic of this work that we do, is that things are always changing. Okay.
Yeah, and the one thing with SHA that I will mention is that SHA-1 was SHA version 1 and is a 160-bit hash algorithm. SHA-2 is SHA version 2, and it starts with a 256-bit algorithm or hash digest. But there are other versions of SHA-2 that have 384, 512, and so there are some longer bit sizes, but the algorithm is still the same. It hasn't necessarily mean that we've gone to SHA-3 or SHA-5 or SHA-10 yet, but we're getting there as we keep moving down the road. And there's some other ones out there like RIPE-MD and some others that are out there, but the most common you're going to come across these days is definitely SHA-2 with a 256-bit hash algorithm.
And one day you might be asked to recommend an algorithm like, hey, we're building some new product. We need we need to generate digital signatures. Hey, Kip, you're the cybersecurity expert in the company. What algorithm should we be using? Don't give a snap answer. Go and do the research first, because what you thought worked this morning when you got up might have been broken by lunchtime. So it's just, sometimes it can move that fast. So just be careful and know that there's all kinds of choices, and you want to be careful which one you recommend, because you want to recommend something that's going to last a long time, but not be too computationally intensive. There's just all kinds of engineering issues there.
Trade-off you have, right? Because if you want ultimate security, the system would be super expensive and super slow.
Yeah.
But if you want ultimate usability, your security really sucks. And so it is always this balance and this trade-off.
Always.
We're building a lot of software at DL Trading right now. And we use a lot of different hashing algorithms as ways to store passwords and other data and encrypting things and decrypting things. And it is always a trade-off, because if you want everything at the highest level, it would cost us a lot more in compute time. And so we have to make more risk decisions.
Yeah. So it's fascinating once you start to apply these things, but the first thing you have to do is know what they are. So we're glad you were here today to listen to us, do our very best to explain to you what is non-repudiation, how does it work in the real world, analog and digital versions. And I don't think there's anything more we have to add. I don't know. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think we did a really good job of covering this whole idea of non-repudiation. And really, the takeaways for the audience, if you're new to cybersecurity, is just remember, when we talk about non-repudiation, there's the no in there, and it means you can't say, no, I didn't do it, right? So non-repudiation means you can't say you didn't do something because we have proof you did. That's the whole concept of non-repudiation. That can be done analog with the signature, digitally with code signing or digital signatures, things like that. And usually we're going to use these with hashing. And as we said back in the integrity episode, hashing is one of these things that's used in both places. And so because of that, you are going to see a lot of overlap between I in CIA and the N in CIA-NA for integrity and non-repudiation. So that being said, I want to thank you all for joining us for yet another episode of Your Cyber Path. And I hope you come over to yourcyberpath.com to learn more about our new Your Cyber Path Pro mentorship program that we have. It is a 12-month program, and you will get a ton of value in this to help you either advance in your current career or move into a new cybersecurity career. And Kip and I would love to work with you in a more high-tech manner instead of a one-to-many, our voices over the podcast. We'd love to work with you individually, jump up some Zoom calls with you and figure out exactly where you are, where you want to be in your career. And the best way to do that is through YCP Pro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want you to kill it. We want to see you out there succeeding. We want you to have amazing jobs, doing phenomenal work, making a big difference, having all this purpose in your day job, right? In the things that you do. It could just make everything so much better for you. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I think that's a wrap. Okay. See you all next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Your Cyber Path. Don't miss an episode. Press the subscribe button now. If you would like to learn more about how to get your dream cybersecurity job, then be sure to visit yourcyberpath.com, where you can access the show notes, search the archive of our top tips and tricks, and discover some fantastic bonus content.